All right, so I've created a couple of different figures to help you interpret main effects and interactions that more closely aligns with the discussion post assignment for this unit. So let's imagine we have a situation here where we are interested in seeing whether candy consumption and age impacts levels of hyperactivity. So the way I want you to break down this situation is in terms of three questions. One, is there a main effect of age? Two, is there a main effect of candy consumption? Three, is there an interaction between candy consumption and age? So let's imagine we have this figure here, and what I want us to do is to interpret this figure with these three questions. So let's focus on the first one here. Is there a main effect of age? All right, so the way you can reframe it is there a difference between children and adults? Because here we have age, we have two levels, children and adults. So the way we answer this question is seeing whether the mean for children is different than the mean for adults. So let's look at the mean here. So the mean for children is somewhere around here. The mean for adults is somewhere around here. And the question is the difference between these two means similar or different? If it's different, then we have a main effect. If it's the same, then we do not. So here the answer is no, we do not have a main effect of age. Now let's move on to the next question. Is there a main effect of candy consumption? In other words, is there a difference between the yes candy group and the no candy group? The yes candy group is in blue and the no candy group is in red. So what we're trying to ask here is the mean for the blue bars different from the mean of the red bars? So let's take a look. So we're looking at the mean of the blue bars. That's somewhere around here. And we're looking at the mean for the red bars. That's also somewhere around here. And the question is, are these two means the same or different? If it is different, then we have a main effect of candy consumption. If it's not different, then we do not. So here, the two means are similar, so there is no main effect of candy consumption. All right, so let's take a look at the next one. Is there an interaction between candy consumption and age? The way you can think about this is the difference between yes candy and no candy consumption different for children and adults? So let's take a quick look here. So here, the difference between yes and no there's no difference. So the difference can be encapsulated with like this dot maybe. And then here, there's again no difference between yes and no for adults. So something like this, like that super tiny dot that I drew. And what we want to do is see whether these differences are different from one another. And based on this figure, there is no difference between children and adults. So there is no interaction. All right, let's move on to the next situation here. All right, so here we have a figure that looks like this. Again, the questions are going to be the same, right? Is there a main effect of age? AKA, is there a difference between children and adults? So let's calculate the mean for children and calculate the mean for adults, and then compare the two. So here, the mean would be somewhere around here for children, and also the same thing for adults. And then we're comparing the mean for children and the mean for adults. And because it looks exactly the same, we do not have a main effect of age. Next question, is there a main effect of candy consumption? AKA, is there a difference between the yes candy group and the no candy group? So let's take a quick look. We want to compare the mean of the blue bars versus the mean of the red bars. So the mean of the blue bars is somewhere around here, right? And then the mean for the red bars is somewhere around here. So what we're trying to do is see whether there's a difference between the mean of the blue bars and the mean of the red bars. And it looks like we do have a difference. So there is a main effect of candy consumption. And the way you would interpret this is that levels of hyperactivity is greater for after candy consumption than no candy consumption. All right. Next question, is there an interaction between candy consumption and age? AKA, is the difference between the yes and no candy consumption different for children and adults. So let's take a look here. Let's take a look at the difference between yes and no for children. So the gap between yes and no for children looks something like this. And then let's calculate the gap of yes and no for adults. So again, the gap is somewhere like this. And what we want to do is compare this gap with this gap. So what we want to do is see whether those two gaps are different from one another. And based on this visual, the gaps look around the same. So that means we do not have an interaction between candy consumption and age. So the difference between yes and no for children is the same as the difference between yes and no for adults. All right, let's go through one more example here. All right, so again, slightly different graph, but same questions. Is there a main effect of age? AKA, is there a difference between children and adults? So let's calculate the mean for children. The mean for children is somewhere around here. Let's calculate the mean for adults. The mean is somewhere around here. And what we want to do is see whether there's a difference between the mean for children and the mean for adults. And there is. So we do have a main effect of age. Is there a main effect of candy consumption? AKA, is there a difference between the yes candy group and no candy group? So what we want to do is compare the blue bars, the mean of the blue bars, with the mean of the red bars. So let's calculate the mean of the blue bars. So the mean of the blue bars is somewhere around here. And the mean of the red bars is somewhere around here. And what we want to do is see whether those means are different from one another. And they are. So here we do have a main effect of candy consumption. All right. So lastly, is there an interaction between candy consumption and age? AKA, is the difference between the yes and no candy different for children and adults? So let's take a look at the difference between yes and no for children. The gap looks something like this. And now let's take a look at the difference between yes and no for adults. The difference looks something like this. And what we want to do is compare that difference to this difference. And those two differences are different from one another. So that means that we do have an interaction between candy consumption and age. All right. So I hope this helps you with your discussion and with just learning about interpreting figures. Please do let me know if you run into any issues when creating your own. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Take care now.